Hello, I'm Foster Hirsch, film historian, interviewer, and it is my pleasure to interview Richard Skipper in advance of his performance at the Laurie Beachman Theater on Friday. Hi, Richard.
Hello, Foster. Thank you so much for this. I'm looking forward to
I,
this.
I'm looking forward to this too. But I want to actually start. We do share something in common. I'm not a performer, but I'm an interviewer, and you're an interviewer. And during the pandemic, I was very proud of a series of interviews I did for the Lambs Club. I thought, and I was watching your interviews during the
And I was
pandemic.
watching yours.
But I I think it was a wonderful way of keeping connected during that unbearably difficult and isolating time.
Hmm.
And uh, watching your interviews and watching mine, not comparing, but we always do that.
We
What
do.
would you say your particular strengths as an interviewer are?
Listening.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, that's the main thing. I always said that I am about celebrating artists and their body of worth. Uh, Anyone can talk to anyone. One of the things that turns me off about most of the quote unquote interviewers that are currently on television is
Mhm.
that they are going for a joke. They are going for a payoff. And that's all of the popular ones. I go back to Jack Parr and Johnny Carson and Steve Allen and what they, Dick Cavett, all of them, and what they brought to the table. When these artists, public figures, were always on their shows. They were there to promote a product or basically to talk about something that was in the news. And it made for riveting television. And my dream, with all due respect to all of the writers out there who write for these comedians, is write the comedy sketches and leave the interviews to the conversation. Just listen to your guest, hear what they have to say, and build upon that.
And you know what is part of that, and I think it's why you're a good interviewer, and I like to think that I am,
You are.
is um, you have to win the trust of the person you're talking to. And if they feel that you care about them, you're interested in what they have to say, and the interview is about them and
Hmm.
not you, as you say, going for the joke, I
Right.
think that's a good part of it. I was fascinated in the old days when Dick Cavett would have on a legend like Betty Davis. She trusted him,
Well, there's a great,
and,
and I encourage
and
everyone
therefore
out
she was
there.
more open with Dick Cavett than with almost anybody else.
I
If
totally
you
agree
want to
with
find
you.
out about Betty Davis, go to those Dick Cavett interviews.
There's also a very great YouTube clip of him interviewing Katharine Hepburn,
Yes.
because Katharine Hepburn was very trepidatious about doing an interview. She hated interviews. And so she came in to check out the studio.
Oh,
And
that
he
was
was smart enough to
yeah.
say, start the cameras. And then and there, she said, let's do this. Once everything was to her specifications, then she sat down and and they did what is probably one of the best interviews that she ever gave.
But it was spontaneous. She trusted him, but he was courageous because the woman who came in, I saw that. The woman who came in checking out the equipment is not somebody I would have wanted to interview at
Hmm.
that moment.
Hmm.
Uh,
Right.
I
But
wouldn't. I don't know if I could have handled her temperament, but he could, and he did. And,
absolutely.
and
And,
she
I always,
sensed she was confident in him. But what you saw was a very insecure superstar coming in, demanding this, demanding that. I would have been out of there, but he could handle it.
well, I think a lot of times when they come in, as you put it, demanding this and demanding that, I think a lot of that comes out of fear, out of uh, their own insecurities. And I don't care who you are, I don't care what you've achieved
Yes,
on this planet, everyone has insecurities.
absolutely.
Insecurities about how you're going to be perceived, insecurities about how you're looking at that given moment, instead of truly being in the moment of this. I read somewhere, and I even mentioned this in my show, that each and every one of us presents to the world the director's cut of ourselves. In other words, we present the image and the vision of the world, hopefully, that we wish to portray to everyone. And so, and everyone's guilty of that. I find that with a lot of the interviewers that are on television now, uh, what is the story that they want to tell, rather than allowing their guest to tell the story that they want to tell? And a lot of times, I don't know about you, but I personally do not like to be sent a series of questions that I'm going to be asked during the interview,
Absolutely.
because I want it to be a conversation.
Yes.
I don't want it to be point A, point B, point C, that this is what we have to get across. So the goal is to, with your guest, let the guest come on, and I give them the chance to tell the story that they want to tell.
Yes, but you direct the conversation subtly
Mhm.
without appearing to direct it. The best compliment I ever had from an interview was from George Siegel, who said, I want to compliment you for taking charge without appearing to take charge.
That's great. I like that.
I thought that was he was a great interview, but I thought that was very good. But you know what?
I know that you're interviewing me, but I want to ask you a question since we're talking about interviews. Is there a particular interview that it still surprises you to this day that you got? And is there still a holy grail interview out there that would really make it all everything, it's like this is what I've been working for.
Well, the Holy Grail interview that I didn't think I was going to get, and it was very hard to get it, was with Harry Belafonte for
Mm,
Music Box Theater in Chicago. We were showing his great film noir, Odds Against Tomorrow, and he said yes, and then he said no. I didn't think it was going to happen, but it did happen, and I'm very proud of that interview, and it is on YouTube and been seen by thousands over the last 20 years.
wow.
Um, but that was hard to get. Uh, is there one out there that I must have? I'm not sure. I'm
Hmm.
seeking for that right now. I'm not sure. Uh, no, not that I can say.
Okay. Okay.
Do you have one?
Well, I really, when Cheetah Rivera's book came out, I really wanted to interview Cheetah Rivera. And a lot of sources told me that she was open and willing to do the interview. And she said no, yes to me. But, um, those that surround her, let's put it that way, uh, said no to the interview.
Oh,
And I was very, very disappointed because I saw that she did every other platform out there. And when you and I both jumped into the COVID waters, so to speak, uh, it seems to me that there were all of a sudden the floodgates opened. And it was great because it gave a lot of people a platform. A lot of them were good, a lot of them were not. and and it would drive me up the wall. I had to learn to let go of it and put blinders on and stay in my lane. An interview that I was trying to get, I would see that they would go to someone else. And I never like to look at other people's interviews of people that are going to be appearing on my platform.
I
But
see.
if it's an interview that I have not gone after, if it's an interview that I have not pursued, I absolutely, such as I watched many of your interviews, and I watch a lot of interviews on YouTube, and I watch them on my smart TV. If there's not a good movie that I want to see, I go to YouTube, and based on my likes, certain things come up that I'm not even expecting. I saw a great interview this week, the Tom and Mickey Show, which is a new podcast that I highly recommend, had Marilyn May on the show, and it was a really great interview.
Have you had Marilyn May on your? Have you?
Oh
You've
yeah,
oh,
yeah,
many times. Yes,
yes,
many times.
yes, yes.
But you know what else we interviewers have to do? We have to prepare for the guest, And our knowledge can't show itself. It has to be interwoven into the discussion, but we have to know that career. We have to know if it's an author, we have to have read the book. I just interviewed uh, Tom Santo Pietro, who's done a
Oh,
superb
oh.
biography of
One of the
Audrey
best.
Hepburn.
I have a shelf of
Audrey
his
Hepburn.
books.
Yes,
Yes,
Audrey Hepburn, terrific
yes.
book. And he said afterwards, "Thank you for having read the book." And I said, "Well, yes, I read every single word of it. That's my job as an interviewer." He said, "That's not always the case, where perhaps the interviewer has read the flap."
Thank
And
you,
that,
Foster. Thank you. I cannot begin to tell you the number of interviews that I've done in which I would say to someone, when this happened to you, and they go, "How did you know that?" And I'd go, "It's in your book."
yeah,
They had even forgotten that they had written it, So, but
yes.
I will say this: when I was doing my podcast, I was very, very fortunate, and I'll tell you how it came to be. Just before uh, COVID even hit, I got to thinking that maybe I'll do a podcast. My original intent would be that I would do an audio version for like just an audio podcast, not on camera or anything along those lines. And the first person I reached out to was Leslie Ann Warren.
Mm.
And I had had the pleasure of interviewing her live on stage when they restored Cinderella several years ago. And so I reached out to her and I said, "I'm thinking of doing this podcast. Would you be my first guest?" And she said, "Absolutely. This is great. Thank you for asking me." And we did the interview. She was coming to New York to do an evening that I love going to each year called Broadway Backwards. She was scheduled to do that. And then we did the interview, which went very well. And it was not live, it was going to be aired later. And she called me up and she said, "Have you heard of this thing called COVID?" And of course, I had not heard anything about this. And she said, "I'm actually afraid to get on the plane and come to New York based on what I'm hearing." And I said, "Well, then you need to call the producers and you need to let them know that. And trust me, I know these guys. If they feel that you're uncomfortable, they're going to want you to do what's best for you." And she said, "Thank you." And then she called me back and said she got out of the contract. Would you believe that Broadway Backwards shut down the next day? They canceled it. And
Mhm.
then 2 days later, all of Broadway shut down. And so I started doing this podcast, and it was a friend that suggested that we do live on camera. So once I started doing this, and I don't know if this is the case with you, it essentially took over my life. And I was, because I did read every book, every author that I had on the show. I was constantly, and sometimes I was reading 3 books at a time. I was prepping for this interview. That one was coming up next week. This one was coming up in 2 weeks. Uh, I did all the research. I did Google searches. I found out what was going on in the news with them. It was a full time job. And my days, I was doing mostly 7 o'clock at evening interviews,
Mm.
believe it or not, 7 days a week.
Oh boy, yeah.
And I've got a lot of content that's out there now, but I burned out. I invested in building my studio and I had curtains behind me, which I eventually took down.
Mm.
Getting the lights, getting the microphones, getting all of these things. And I think a lot of people, and you pointed out earlier that it needs to seem seamless. It needs to seem as if it's just coming off the cuff, but we do have to have the preparation in
We
place
have to
before
have
we
the
get to that point.
preparation. The
Yes,
guests just have to have lived their lives or written
that's
the book,
right.
but we have to have the preparation to take it through. And it is a tough job, but you have to make it look easy.
Absolutely.
Richard, I want to segue into something about your career that fascinates me because I've been told, and doing research on you, is this an accurate statement? Richard Skipper knows more about Hello Dolly than anybody else on the planet.
Carol Channing used to say that I knew more about Hello Dolly than she did. Jerry Herman uh, basically thanked me for the work that I did in preserving the history of Hello Dolly. I'm saying this to the producers of the Transport Group. You're about to do a concert version of Hello Dolly at Carnegie Hall. I want to be involved, either on
Absolutely.
stage or behind the scenes. I
Absolutely.
don't care. I just want to be involved. Um,
Absolutely.
I am what this show means to me, and there are so many articles that have been written about Dolly over the years. There are productions of Dolly, as Jerry Herman once said, somewhere in the world right now, a woman and sometimes a man is coming down the stairs at the Harmonia Gardens, even as we speak. It's happening somewhere right now. And what I love about that musical is that it's about stepping out of your comfort zone. It's about rejoining the human race, getting out there at whatever stage you are in life. And you look at the Dolly character, for example, and the Dolly character is living, as she says, from hand to mouth, but she's not happy. And then you've got Horace Vandegelder, who's half a millionaire. He's got all the wealth in the world that he could possibly use at that point in his life, and he's unhappy. So, where do you find the happiness? By stepping out of your comfort zone. That to me is the whole message of Hello Dolly.
It's a message for everybody.
It's a message for everybody.
And timeless and timeless. Now, I wanted to talk to you about this. I'm very proud. I don't know how many of us are out there, but I saw every single performer who did Dolly in the original Broadway production. Since that, I have not seen a single production of Hello
Wow.
Dolly, but I saw every one of the Broadway originals, including B.B. Osterwald,
Wow.
who was the standby
Yes,
for many years.
absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
uh, I love to discuss and rate them. Uh, of course, the role belonged to Carol Channing. None of the others was anywhere near as good as she was,
And there
including
was so,
Ethel Merman. Am I right? The part was written for
it
her.
was written for Ethel Merman, and when Ethel Merman was approached to do the show, she said, I have spent my entire life in dressing rooms and hotel rooms. I do not want to even hear the music because I don't want in the back of my mind to say, why did I turn that down? But I will say this, I believe firmly that if Ethel Merman had opened the show, it would not have had the 7-year run that it had. I think it would have been a great musical along the lines of Gypsy, Annie Get Your Gun, Anything Goes, any of the other shows that she had done. And it would have been part of the Ethel Merman canon. Uh, I really do believe this. I think that it would have had a respectable run because it was Ethel Merman. But what made that production so unique was the fact that when Carol Channing, after 2 years, said, I want to do the national tour, because Carol believed, Carol Channing, Tommy Tune, the Lunts, so many of the people from Mary Martin, from that world of show business. It wasn't just about what was going on Broadway, it was about what was going on around the country. And Carol believed that if you took these shows on the road, when they came back, when those audiences would come to New York, they would return the favor and they would come and see you. And she was right. So when Carol Channing left to do the national tour of Hello Dolly, uh, then rather than closing the show, uh, David Merritt got the idea of bringing in a movie star, and that was Ginger Rogers. And Ginger Rogers did a year and a half, and then should I go down the list? You
Yes,
know them
please
all.
do. No,
Uh,
I know them all, but I can't
yes.
do the order. You can.
After Ginger Rogers left the show, she was followed by Martha Ray, Betty Grable, Pearl Bailey, Phyllis Diller, and then eventually Ethel Merman said, yes, now that you've got it right, I'll come in and do it.
Yeah, and they were different, and it shows that the role is more elastic. It wasn't that they were all trying to imitate Carol Channing. They weren't. They were
No,
doing their own dollies, and the role is big enough to allow for a variety of interpretations. But
I,
Carol was the best.
I
Uh,
went to see an interview this past week, and the actress that was being interviewed She came into a show as a replacement, and they wanted her to do everything exactly as the actress that she was replacing was doing. And we've reached a point in the theater where it's not about bringing your personality to the role and trusting that the personality is going to be the selling point, but trying to replicate what the preceding person did. When I think of, for example, Raquel Welch going into Woman of the Year, replacing Laura McCall. No one can replace her, stepping into her shoes. Uh, Raquel Welch, the producers were smart enough to let Raquel Welch be Raquel Welch. And the producers that we have now, we don't have shows that will run. Phantom of the Opera is a good example, but uh, can you name all of the Phantoms? I mean, with all due respect to these incredible actors who played this role, you didn't see their names above the title of the show. And we've gotten away from these star vehicles. And I know that the writers, the producers, the directors, the intent now is for the show to be the driving force rather than the artist who's coming into the show.
But Richard, in a way, that may be true for musicals, but in dramas, look at the stars we have this season and the astronomical prices that their very appearance commands. And it doesn't
Absolutely.
matter that Othello got bad reviews and that Denzel Washington can't do Shakespeare. It doesn't matter. People are paying $900 to see him. He's
Hmm.
a star. Uh, George Clooney was well reviewed for Good Night and
But
what
my
is it?
point
Night.
that I'm making, Foster,
But
is that
but for straight plays, the stars are being imported.
you're absolutely right. But the issue is that when Denzel Washington and Jake Gyllenhaal and George Clooney leave those shows will close. There
Yes,
will not be a succession of actors coming in
not at
who can
all.
put
The
their own spin
shows
on
were
those roles.
built and presented for those big names. They command enormous prices, up to 1,000 and more. And the shows in limited runs are budgeted to be successful at that length of run. Is
That's
that
right.
correct?
That's absolutely right. And the thing is that for every person out there who complains, it's ridiculous that they're charging $1,000 a ticket. I remember when Nicholas Nickleby came to Broadway, and it was a $100 ticket for a two-night event, and people were up in arms. Oh my God, $100 for a Broadway show, and look where it is now.
A
I mean, it's
thousand dollars.
unbelievable. And I will tell you what really saddens me about the state of theater right now is that there is such a it's become an elitist art form, and the average person cannot afford to go to the theater. Uh, and it used to be affordable. When I came to New York in 1979, I saw everything on Broadway, and
And
I
you
could
could
afford
afford
it.
to. You could
I
afford to do it.
and you could get twofers. Remember those?
Oh, yes. Oh,
and
yes.
I, and it saddens me. I mean, when I think of my friends that have children and they've got three kids and they want to take them to see Lion King on Broadway. Oh my God. Not only are you dealing with what's happening in the theater, but there's gas and tolls and parking and congestion pricing and all of those things. A family of four will easily spend between $1,000 to $1,500 to go and see a Broadway show now.
It's prohibitive.
It's
And it
prohibitive.
and it's anti-democratic. It's not what the theater should be at all.
I
But
agree.
back to our wonderful string of dollies, and I could afford, as a student and a graduate student, I could afford to see every one of them. And people who wanted to see Dolly could afford it, even with a Betty Grable, a Ginger Rogers in the cast. You got to know Carol Channing very well. Is that
Yes.
correct? You knew her
Yes.
very well.
Yes.
I had a wonderful weekend with her at a film festival in Arkansas, but never mind that.
Was
How
it
did,
Little Rock?
it was Pine Bluff, actually. No, it wasn't Little Rock, but she could have
Uh,
done
uh,
it. um, I found her in that weekend very accessible, very friendly, very grateful for attention and recognition.
Absolutely.
Only moment I had a problem with her, and it wasn't a problem, was I in the interview I said, "Well, in your book, Miss Channing, you mentioned appearing in two movies, First Traveling
I
Sales
knew where
Lady
you're headed.
and of course Thoroughly Modern Millie. But of course there was a third movie, Otto Preminger's Skidoo." And she said, there's a pause, and she said, "Well, I only wanted to talk about happy things in the book, but I pushed a little bit to talk about the film, which was I knew was not a happy experience for
Mm-hmm.
her."
Mm-hmm.
And for just a moment, the sharp Carol Channing came out, and she
Mm-hmm.
said, "Nobody but you cares about Skidoo."
Wow. Wow. Interesting. I never mentioned Skidoo with her. I knew that it was a sore point in her life and career. It was one of those weak moments. I enjoy her moments in the film. I will be honest with you.
I thought they're fun.
Yes, they're
And
fun.
especially at the end when she's singing the great title song on the boat with
Skidoo on the
Captain Pat.
boat.
I thought it was terrific, actually.
Yes, but it was one of those things that she never ever wanted, and there were a couple of interviews that I was even able to set up for her over the years. And friends would call me and say, I'd like to interview Carol Channing. And I'd reach out through her publicist to find out if we could get her. And she very rarely said no to me. And when she would do those interviews, I would say, whatever you do, do not ask about Skidoo.
Oh, I didn't talk to you. You didn't get to me.
No, we didn't
I, did,
talk
I
before the
didn't get
interview.
that memo, obviously.
Yes, because it would change the tone of the interview, and she never wanted to go there.
She did actually talk about it.
You know, I
She did.
remember seeing
She
an
did.
interview with, believe it or not, um, well, David Grodin was interviewing her. I'm Charles Grodin. Charles Grodin, excuse me. Charles Grodin was interviewing her, and he brought up the book Diary of a Mad Playwright, which is about a behind the scenes look at legends on the road. And it was written by James Kirkwood. And she, when he started asking her about the book, she said, Charles, I never read that book. And he tried to push it ahead. She said, since I didn't read the book, let's move on. And because she would not talk about that. And that book was unnecessary. It was an absolutely unnecessary. It's on my shelf, but it that book should never have been written because it was based on a lot of half truths, and it was told through the eyes of a disgruntled producer, So and a playwright. So I don't think that book should have been written.
But was she unhappy with Legends?
They were unhappy with it because, first of all, for those who don't know the show, it's about two aging stars, very much along the vein of Betty Davis and Joan Crawford, who had been feuding for most of their lives. And through strange circumstances, they've been brought together to do a play. Um, the audience did not want to see Carol Channing and Mary Martin dropping the F bomb over and over and over on
No,
stage
no.
and going in a direction. And for whatever reason, I wasn't there, I wasn't a part of it, and I never discussed it with her. But we all, as artists, make choices in our careers that we think this is going to be good for us, this is going to take us in another direction. And sometimes those that have supported you and followed you all these years, they don't want to see you in that light. Another perfect example was when Lucille Ball did Stone Pillow. People did not want to see her, even though if you look at her arc of work, her early work, she did a lot of dramas. But at this point in her life, she was so established as being the funny Lucille Ball
Mhm.
that a lot of people tuned in to see a funny Lucy as a homeless woman in New York. I don't know if you ever saw it. And she lost, her fans. I don't think she ever lost her fans, but they turned on her. And it was very painful and hurtful to her.
but Legends was sort of a misconceived project, and probably
Absolutely.
and not a well-written play. I think one of the reviews said it's about two people who are just making a personal appearance. I
Right.
mean, it had that aura to it. It didn't help either one of them for sure. But when she was with us for that weekend in Arkansas, she performed that wonderful monologue from Dolly, and in front of a group at a private home. She performed it as if it was opening night on
I
Broadway.
know. I know.
She held nothing back. She had such commitment and conviction. And I realized watching her that it wasn't just that she had the right singing voice for Dolly. She understood the part. She acted it. It
Oh,
was
it
great.
was so much a part of her DNA.
Yeah,
I
it was
mean,
an acting performance.
I mean, it wasn't easy. I mean, Gower did not want her in the role because he felt that she was too recognizable as Lorelei Lee. And not only when you look at Carol Channing and her career, and Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, 1949, that she's doing the show, and it was not until 1964 that Hello Dolly came along. That's a big chunk of time. She continued to work. She did nightclub work. She did a few Broadway shows that were. Showgirl was a moderate success,
Yeah,
but
but moderate success is not a big success at
not
all.
a big success at all, like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. But her offstage persona was Lorelei Lee. She presented herself as the dumb blonde, but as Sandra Lee said to me, she was the dumb blonde who reached into her purse and knew exactly what she was pulling out. She was so calculating in terms of how she presented herself to the world that the character of Carol Channing was as big a character as Lorelei Lee and Dolly Levi. And she masterminded that. And she did it masterfully. I know that sounds redundant, but she
Mhm.
did it masterfully to the point that when Gower Champion was casting Hello Dolly, he felt that she was so entrenched in that role that she would never be able to play Dolly Levi. And thank God it was Marge Champion who worked with Carol to get the way she stood on stage, the way that she commanded herself, the way she presented herself. That's all Marge Champion.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yes, yes,
I did know Marge, and she talked about going in and directing all the replacement casts over
yes,
many
yes,
years. So she was
yes.
obviously deeply connected with it. But I didn't know she actually had directed Carol's performance.
Well, I wouldn't say that she directed Carol's performance, but she really guided her. She worked with her on terms of how she would sound, how she would stand, how she would present herself to the audience. I was talking to someone the other night, and he said that the first time he saw Carol in Dolly, and when she put her arms out and smiled that big grin, it was almost as if she was bringing the entire audience to her, and she had this ability to be able to, it always felt as if she was reaching across the footlights and she was grabbing the audience and she was pulling them right up there on the stage. To me, that is the epitome of being a great entertainer. And each of the dollies brought their own persona to the role, and none of them had that thing that Carol had of bringing the audience in the way that she did. I would say the closest to that would have been Pearl Bailey.
Well, having seen all of them, uh, I think she was second after Carol. I would
Hmm.
agree.
Hmm.
Pearl Bailey did bring us in. Um, and again, she too was a better actress than I think she was often given credit for.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that.
Really good act. You look at her in Porgy and Bess, the film that nobody can see anymore, but that's another story. It's a
Well, I saw it. I went to
you
a
saw it.
screening, and I heard that they were going to be doing a screening at BAM one night, and it was not a great print. Colors were constantly, it was like
Yes.
watching South Pacific.
Yeah.
The colors kept changing. But it was one of those musicals. And for the longest time, because Irving Berlin was not happy with Annie Get Your Gun. And Annie Get Your Gun was pulled from shelves for years and
For
years and
years and
years.
years and years.
And finally, but these films, one of the other films that I always wanted to see was the George Cukor version of The Bluebird.
Oh,
And then
yeah.
I finally saw that it was going to be shown on television one night. And it was one of the worst films I have
It's terrible.
ever seen in my
It's terrible.
life.
It's just
Yes.
terrible. You can't believe that all these wonderful MGM people could make a film so misconceived and so
Yes.
awkward
Yes.
if they'd never made a film before. Anyway, but Pearl Bailey in Porgy and Bess gives a terrific, droll acting performance, and she brought a lot of that quality on stage to Hello Dolly. Uh, uh, Nobody's asking, but I'll volunteer it. The least impressive of the Broadway dollies, in my opinion, was Betty Grable, who I didn't think had any character. It was Betty Grable on stage. She smiled and winked, but I didn't think there was anybody there.
Wow.
It's the worst thing you can say about a performance. She was neither good nor bad. She sort of wasn't.
Wow. Wow. Well, as I said to you when we spoke yesterday,
In-
that I, she was battling throat cancer at that time. And I don't know what the circumstances were the night that you saw it. Years ago, I saw an actress who replaced another actress, an actress that I absolutely love, in a show. I'm not going to say who it is.
Yeah.
In a show that I absolutely loved. She came in as a replacement, and I went with great excitement to see her. And I went, what were they thinking? Because I did not feel that she was connected at all to the character she was playing. And then I was told afterwards by someone working on the show, she was going through a very difficult period in her life, in her private life. And I think that for whatever reason, the day that I saw the show, there was just a complete disconnect from what she was doing on stage.
Yeah. That could happen. Uh, I'm not sure that Betty Grable would have had the force. I'm not sure she would have known in her bones what it takes to sustain a stage appearance. I saw Alice Faye when she came back in Good News
Hmm.
with John Payne.
Right?
I liked Alice Faye in movies, but seeing her on stage, I saw a woman who had no understanding at all of the energy and presence it takes to hold the stage. She
Well,
couldn't do it.
years ago, and I don't know if you
Couldn't do it.
remember this, they brought in a very famous actor that was going to replace one of the original leads in La Cage aux Folles, and they did a huge campaign announcing that this guy was coming into the show, and he was on buses and subways, and there were television ads and everything, and they realized after the first rehearsal that this man could neither act, sing, or dance on stage. And after the whole campaign had been put into place, they ended up replacing him, and the show closed shortly after that. Look
Really?
it up, everyone. I'm not going to say who it is.
Okay. Oh, you look it up. Now, Richard, you for years did do Carol Channing on stage. Is that right? You
As I
performed.
put it, Foster, I
Yes,
appeared as Carol Channing. I never did her on stage.
but you appeared as Carol Channing.
Yes, I did.
Did
Yes.
she coach you? Did she see you? Did she give you responses?
I'll tell you, it's very, very interesting because how everything fell into place. I was a huge fan of hers. I would get up and perform at open mics, not in costume, mind you, or at parties, just singing the songs from Dolly and Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and her songbook, if you will. And a dear friend of mine, it was announced that she was coming back to Broadway to do Hello Dolly uh, in what would be her last revival of the show. And a friend of mine called me up and said, if you don't do a show about Carol Channing at this time, you're making the biggest mistake of your life. And I said, well, what if I do this and she doesn't like what I'm doing? And he said, well, you'll find out about it. But I would do it. And then I found out as I was putting the show together that the New York City Gay Men's Chorus was doing a tribute to Jerry Herman. And I wrote letters, I made phone calls, everything landed on deaf ears. And so a friend of mine called me and asked me if I was going to go to the concert. I was not going to go to the concert because I wanted so much to be a part of it that it would be uncomfortable for me to be sitting in the audience. But he told me that he was playing the after party and that Carol was going to be there.
Mm.
He said, I want you to crash the party as Carol. I want you to come in and I want you to do this performance. I think, do I keep moving things around in my office. I don't have it handy. The photograph, but Google it, Richard Skipper, Carol Channing. It pops right up. Uh, I ended up going to this party. And when I came in and she saw me, the first thing she asked me is, where did you learn to do this? And I said, Bennington College in Vermont. You do know where that is, Carol? It's the lower left-hand corner part of the map, the part of the state that's always purple. That, of course, is her material. And she said, how long have you been impersonating me? And I said, well, who's to say you're not impersonating me? And she lost it. She just roared. She grabbed me. She asked me a lot of questions. She was asking Richard Skipper questions, but I never broke character. And everything I answered was about her. She said, you're scaring the hell out of me. Because it was almost as if this mirror image of her had happened at that moment. And so she, hold on one second. There we are, if you can see this. Yes. And she signed this to Richard with much gratitude for the love you give me, Carol.
So
And
she was intrigued and not offended.
she was not offended. And she, after I performed upstairs and she came upstairs, I'm trying to give a Reader's Digest version of the story, but she came up and after I finished, she said to the audience, this is not a tribute, this is a Valentine. She said, this is the first time that I've been shown with love and respect and polish. She says, most people who impersonate her, and this is true of most impersonators, not all, but most, they're making fun of their subject. And a lot of impersonators are presenting, again, the version of Carol or the version of the person that they are impersonating based on things that they've seen other impersonators do. So they'll pick up, like Cher with the hair and, the tongue, and they will follow certain things that they do, and they try to replicate those moments on stage. I never did that. I never went on and said, when Carol sings this lyric, she does this. And when she sings this lyric, I was not a robotic version of Carol Channing. When I hit the stage, I came on stage and I tried to present her as I saw her, not the way that I felt that I should be presenting her, if that makes sense to you. And so when I told Carol that I was writing this show, and I said, I only want to do it with your permission. And she said, take the gauntlet and run with it. And then I opened my show at Don't Tell Mama on 46th Street. And one night, a woman was in the audience, Patty Rockwell, and she said she was about to produce a show at, wait till you hear this name of a venue, Trump's Taj Mahal in Atlantic City. And so I went to Atlantic City, did 2 long-running shows there, played the Hilton, and my career just started opening up there. When Carol's marriage to Charles Lowe was ending, and there was a lot of innuendo and gossip and, quite frankly, garbage in the newspapers about it, I wrote a letter to Carol. And I said, your private life will always be your private life. And I will never do anything to embarrass you or to do anything. And she wrote back to me and said that that meant a lot to her. And that I think that solidified her respecting me and what I was trying to do on stage. And she knew that I never made fun of her. And when she started coming back to performing in the latter years of her life, I was so fortunate to actually share stages with her.
Mm.
I was glad she was in the audience of many of my performances. I did not make a move, that she was not aware of. And when she got her star on the Palm Springs Walk of Fame, I was invited to be their guest and to stay at her home.
Oh,
And that to see the Carol Channing, I remember uh, being there, being up for breakfast, and she walked out of her bedroom, no makeup on or anything, and Harry said, uh, "Carol, you have no makeup on." She said, "Richard loves me the way I am."
now let me ask you this, Richard.
Yes.
I was with Carol Channing in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, uh, a very large Black population. And in the wonderful bed and breakfast where we were both staying, she granted an interview to a local Black journalist. I was in the room.
Hmm.
And she said to the journalist, "I'm so proud of my Black heritage." Now, she mentions her Black heritage in her book, but there are those I've talked to who dispute it. She
No,
said she's
it's
a
true.
Black woman. She defined herself as at least part of Black woman. Is it true or not?
Well, she didn't really define herself as a Black woman. But what happened was when she wrote her memoirs, which, by the way, is a hodgepodge. It's not really a good book, to be honest with you. But when in the book, she writes one sentence. She had a very interesting relationship with her mother. Let's just put it that way. So when she was going away to Bennington College in Vermont, her mom sat her down and said, "If you get pregnant, chances are you're going to have a Black baby." Her mother was telling this basically to shock her because that would have been, in her mother's eyes, something scandalous. But it was at that moment that Carol Channing found out that her father's mother was African American. And so Carol wrote that in the book. And it was just basically as an anecdote. She said she regretted putting it in the book, not because of shame or anything having to do with that, but because the rest of the world still perceives it as such. And the rest of the world would ask her these questions based on not really wanting to know, but really based on, is that really true? I mean, like there was something wrong about it.
Yes.
And Carol said the moment that she found out that she was of Black heritage, she thought, well, that makes me a better dancer. That makes me a better singer. That makes me better, at anything that
But
I.
Richard, she said those very words
Yes,
to the
yes.
Black journalist in Pine Bluff.
But my point is that she did not say those things until her book came out.
Yes.
And again, she knew the audience that she was playing to. And she was absolutely right to do that. And she was very, very proud of that moment and did not think of it as shame and did not think of it as anything that she wanted to hide. It was just a
So
part of who she is.
there's it is what she wrote is accurate.
Absolutely.
Father's
Absolutely.
her father's mother was
Yes.
African American.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
accurate. That's an accurate statement.
That's accurate.
Oh,
Yes.
okay,
So I
fascinating.
just want to let you know we are at the 10-minute
Okay,
into
I
the
want to just say two things.
Yes.
I want to just, if I
I've
may,
enjoyed this so much, by the
I
way.
just want to plug my own book, Richard, which is out in Hollywood and the movies of the 50s, The Collapse of the Studio System, The Thrill of Cinerama, and the Invasion of the Ultimate Body Snatcher television. If you like movies of the
Where
50s,
can I get this book?
Hollywood, it's on Amazon. It's everything you wanted to know and more about the movies of the 50s, Cinerama, 3D, CinemaScope, VistaVision, Audrey Hepburn, Grace Kelly, Marlon Brando, the whole panoply. And I would like to just point out I have a podcast with my wonderful editor, Victoria Wilson, called the Victoria Wilson Foster Hirsch Podcast. Enough about me. Now,
But
Richard,
before we move on, now that you brought this up, do you talk about A Star Is Born in the book?
I certainly do.
Oh, good! I can't
I
wait to get
certainly
it.
do. I certainly do. But now this is all about you and the leading up to Friday night at the Laurie Beachman Theater, everything you always wanted to know about Richard Skipper. Is that the
That's
correct
right.
title?
But we're afraid to ask.
You're afraid to ask. Tell us what we can look forward to and expect about this upcoming performance.
Well, the songs, we know what we're going to sing. Uh, I opened the show basically telling how I got from a tobacco farm in South Carolina
Mm.
to New York 46 years ago. And then after I do my opening number, which my director, James Beeman, I want to give a huge shout out to him because he did a phenomenal job of tying my story into my opening song. And the way that he has broken it up and everything, it's a lot of fun. And then we take questions from the audience. The audience can ask me anything about people I've worked with, places I've been, life lessons that I've learned over the past 46 years of being in this business. And the thing is that I have learned, uh, that there's so many people who've said to me over the years, you've got all these great stories to tell. Why not put them on a stage and tell them? And I thought this is a great idea. I did a show a couple of years ago called The Magic of Believing. The book that got me to New York, come to see the show to find out what it is. But the book that got me to New York was The Magic of Believing by Claude M. Bristol. I'll just share this much with you. In the book, he says, set your mind on a goal like a homing pigeon, and go after it with dogged determination. And I closed the book. True story. I closed the book and said to my parents, 5 years from today, I'm going to New York.
Mm.
And of course, they laughed because they could not even fathom that I was serious about this. But 5 years to that day, I came to New York. And so, uh, the Magic of Believing show that I did a couple of years ago was all about the trajectory of my life up to that point. And at that point, and this again was, 6 years ago that we did the show. My director, Jay Rogers, God bless him, has since passed away. And he worked with me so beautifully on that show. But I wanted to do something different. Some of those stories that I told in that show, yes, they will be told again because the stories are my stories. But until I pick up the card and I read the card from the audience, I have no idea what you're going to ask me. So for
And
me,
anything goes, Richard. And you'll
anything
entertain any
goes.
question. Audience
Anything goes.
audiences can ask you anything.
They can ask me anything. And the thing is that the thing I've learned about doing what I do, and I love the art form of cabaret, but what I love the most about it is not what I do on stage. It's about the energy that I get from the audience. I love bringing people together. I'm like a hyacinth bouquet. I love having my candlelight dinners, my candlelight suppers, and bringing people from different areas of my life together and just sitting around the table and talking. And I want to take that energy and I want to bring it onto the stage. Without getting political, we're living in a very divided time right now. And the way that I say, can you imagine me as an entertainer walking out on stage and saying, okay, I want all the Republicans on this side of the room. I want the Democrats on this side of the room. If you're undecided, please leave. I don't want you here. Without picking sides, I'm going to play only to this side of the room. And that's where we've gotten.
Yes.
And someone told me the other day, who was a different political persuasion of mine, but we're still very good friends. She went to see a show, and the comments that were being made were a big turnoff to her. She says, I didn't want to come to a political evening. I will, you say anything goes. I will not discuss politics, but I
Mm.
do have stock answers that will get me around the politics because without taking sides, because I don't want to alienate one person in my audience. Um, my philosophy as an artist is, and this is not true of everybody, and I get that, but if I've offended one person, I've offended one person too many. I never want to offend anyone. And sometimes I may say something that may offend somebody.
I
Um,
mean, that could happen to any of us.
that could happen to any of us.
Inadvertently, we may have said something that some
Inadvertently, that's the operative word, Foster.
inadvertently.
Yes. But to set out to do it
To set
intentionally,
out is different.
is a completely different
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, that you're not doing that, but you will be singing
I
on
will be singing.
Friday.
I've
You
got a
will be
lot of
singing
songs in the show.
a lot of songs,
Yeah.
and you'll be talking about Carol and Hello Dolly.
If the audience wants to hear that, you got to be there to hear about it. You got to put it on a card, because unless I pull that card up, I will not be discussing Carol. I will only discuss her if it comes up on a card. So if there are things that you want to know about Carol, um, that's the place to be. Come and find out.
Okay, so and you believe in improvisation.
I do. I
You
do.
in life as well as on the stage.
I believe that every day that we get up, we are, yeah, every day unfolds in a different way. And some people are very, very rigid, um, uh, both good or bad. I don't live in a 9 to 5 world. Uh, my days are spent every waking, during the day. I sit down at my desk, true story. Before I turn my computer on, I say, how can I be of service today
Ah,
to every person that I come in contact with? And that's the way that I pursue my career. That's the way that I pursue everything. My days are spent pursuing work in this industry, an industry that's constantly changing, an industry where, when I was performing as Carol Channing Foster, I performed all over the world, and I would be flown to an event. I would be put up in a nice hotel or a bed and breakfast. And then, in addition to being paid, 9 times out of 10, I was given a per diem. I would be wined and dined while I was away doing these shows. That world is gone. It's gone completely. And most of the venues that, if they even do get back to me, want to know if I would be interested in doing a rental uh, in in the venue. And as an artist, it's an impossible thing for me to travel cross country, do a complete rental of a theater, and hope for the best when they're not going to advertise or promote or do anything to get an audience in. So I would say that 85 to 90% of my time is spent trying to get booked in these venues that I used to get booked in, but now we're under a completely different regime. And then when I do get booked in those venues, the other 15 to 20% of my time is spent trying to generate press, a buzz, and an audience. Just as reaching out to you and
yes,
asking you to do this, which means the world to me. And we are at the 1 hour point, believe it or
yes.
not. Yes.
But
And I
but
don't want to take up any more of your time.
no, but we want people to come to the Laurie Beachman Theater next Friday night, May 30th at 7 p.m.
Yes, here's the information, everything you always want to know about Richard Skipper, but we're afraid to ask. And there are a few seats left. If you go to the Laurie Beachman website and just pull up my name, and it's right there, use this code for anyone who's watching. RSC, all capital letters, stands for Richard Skipper Celebrates, RSC 2025 exclamation point. And I'll see you next Friday night.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Foster, so
Thank
much.
you, Richard. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.